Welcome back to Empowerment Radio. We are talking about mindfulness and making sense of mindfulness. Now, when I read Keith's book, Making Sense of Mindfulness, I have to say it was really an eye-opening for me to just see his principles and also see how mindfulness in his way of teaching it has that heart connection to it. Because in some ways, many that I've heard talking about their experiences with meditation or mindfulness or the power of now, it's more like you are approaching yourself from an observer perspective. You're more like, present with yourself without judgment. You're looking at your thoughts. And you mentioned before the inner saboteur, but you're not engaging. And to be honest, it drives me nuts because I don't feel that any of just observing is enough for us to get a relationship with ourselves. Now, in your book, Keith, you're mentioning the subconscious is like a child. And in many ways, you're absolutely right. I agree with that. But you cannot, when your child is acting up, just stare at it impassionately without really interacting. So what I loved about your book is that kindness approach. It is that feeling of, yes, I'm actually sending also something back to myself while I'm meditating. So how would you see this in your practice? You're still in your mind, but maybe a part of you is freaking out. Let's say your saboteur says, you're wasting your time or you're not going anywhere or anything like that. How do you approach that? Do you really just watch it, or are you sending something back to that source?
Yeah, well, initially when saboteur, and just those of you watching or listening that don't know what that is, that just refers to that voice in the head, that voice, inner voice that's telling you all the things that are going to go wrong. It's very fear-based, or it might actually be that part of you, if just a feeling that it's just like, the butterflies in your stomach or the sinking in your belly of like, I'm going to fail, or this isn't going well, or I'm not good enough. When that comes up, what I find right away is, this is, a lot of us just let that run our show. We just let the fear-based thinking run our show. Fear, false evidence appearing real. The saboteur makes this seem so real. So part of this practice is really noticing the difference between the saboteur, the fear-based feelings or thoughts that come in, and naming them as opposed to letting them run the show. That's just so crucial to name here, because if you don't expose, I call it expose the saboteur. If you don't name the fear-based thought or feeling and become aware of it, it has control over you, and you literally get stuck in this place of mediocrity, living in a place of literally being stuck like a flea in a jar. I got to share this too. This is so, when I was working on this book, they've done experiments on fleas, and we're a lot like this when it comes to the saboteur. If you put a flea in a jar, it's going to jump right out of the jar. It can jump 100 times its height. But if you put a lid on the jar, the flea jumps and hits the bottom of the lid. And over time learns that hitting the bottom of the lid is not an enjoyable thing. So it over time trains itself to only jump so high as to not hit the bottom of the lid. And when you take the lid off the jar, the flea never jumps out again. It's trained itself to only jump so high. And for a lot of us that are stuck in these negative thinking patterns of saboteur, we end up finding ourselves literally stuck in this pattern. And so to get out of this is to name it, is to go, hang on a minute, is this really what my life purpose is? Is this what I'm being called to live? And so I think for a lot of us in this practice of mindfulness, the invitation is to name the saboteur, is to not let it take over, it's to name it, to get back into this place of, okay, I'm going to take a breath, I'm going to slow down. That's my saboteur. The crazy thing is your saboteur actually thinks it's trying to keep you safe. It thinks it's doing you a favor by showing up and protecting you. It's in the scientific part of this, it's really linked to the primal part of our brain that's trying to connect us or protect us from being attacked by lions, But majority of the time, your saboteur is like a overprotective parent that's trying to keep you in this very safe, protective place, so you never step outside your comfort zone. So in the mindfulness practice, in my experience of this, it's like, okay, let's name the saboteur and what's beyond it. what's possible outside of that? And what I've come to find is there's more to us than the saboteur. In fact, there's something that I refer to in the book as our higher self, that part of us that's creative, that part of us that's connected to everything. And as we're sitting in this place of slowing down the mind and really tuning in, we end up finding that in the unconscious part of us that you referenced, the unconscious mind, there's intuition, inner teacher wisdom. There's these little whispers that pop in. Like for me in the 7th grade, when that whisper in the middle of that nightmare where I was failing and the saboteur said, run for the hills, I got this little intuition that popped in that said, play this song, it's going to go way better. And breaking into that and everybody singing along, it's like we start learning how to trust ourselves, our intuitive gut feeling, that place of inner knowing. And to access it consciously is really, I think, one of the main reasons why we would practice mindfulness, is to start really tuning into the part of us that knows the truth, that knows that we're here on the planet in a place of love as opposed to fear. And to really, when we talk about kindness, moving towards that place of light as opposed to dark, moving towards the kindness. And when we tap into the intuition, it comes from that place of kindness. It comes from that place of love. It is that. It's who we are at our essential core being. So it's mindfulness gives us the chance to really embody that, to live from that place. I could go on and on about this because
I know it's beautiful.
Oh,
It's beautiful. And I'm absolutely in agreement with you. And I don't like it, to call the saboteur, because it really doesn't want to make us miserable. But you're absolutely right. It's an overprotective aspect of us that just runs these old ideas of, you're going to hit your head when you jump too high. So I think, yeah, that's definitely something that needs to be, with kindness, explained to that, no, I can jump higher and life is much more safe than you think it is. But what I'm wondering is you mentioned in your book opening your mind, but then there is also the aspect of opening the heart. And I think that's where the kindness comes in. When you really feel about, talk every day with clients that are anxious or insecure or went through traumas and depression, and they have protected themselves by closing their heart. They do feel like, there is a wall that doesn't show the world the vulnerability that I feel, and it doesn't also show me what's inside of my heart, because that wall keeps everyone outside. How do you, and you always have in your book beautiful practices, how do you teach people to open their hearts again, even though they may be struggling with insecurity, even at the beginning they may feel there's a lot of self-loathing going on? What are steps people can take through mindfulness to have more access to the beauty and the power within their hearts?
Yeah, well, here's one way, and this really helped me in the beginning. I think about my thoughts and my thinking mind. I call it the conscious mind. I think about that as one partner in a relationship. It's like one partner in a relationship. And the other partner I think of as my heart center, something that is part of what I call the unconscious mind. We've got a conscious mind that's thinking thoughts all day long and making decisions. And we've got this unconscious mind, which is holding memory, feelings, intuition. In a lot of ways, I think about it as the feminine part of us. Like if these really were two partners, the mind and the heart, right? The mind tends to be more of the masculine partner. It's the part of us that's, let's get this done. Let's just take action. Let's do it. The heart center tends to be more of the feminine. It's that inner knowing, like that mom's always know energy. I asked my mom advice. She always seems to know the answer, And so it's really about getting this partner, your mind, to connect with this partner, your heart, and have a conversation in balance. But for the majority of us, in the studies they've done, 80% of people in the world are living in reactive mode, meaning they are literally up in their conscious mind exclusively, overthinking, overanalyzing, saboteur. So what would happen if we invited the thinking mind, as opposed to trying to run the entire show in our entire life? What if the thinking mind started learning how to listen initially to the wisdom of the heart, to the intuitive part of us that knows that mums always know energy? So the practice for me deepens here, where, just by taking a few breaths, we start tuning in to that inner place of intuition. And so a practice I do is I literally close my eyes and I invite my partner, the mind, to listen to my heart. And I take my hand and I place it on my heart. And I take a few breaths and I just really connect to my heart. And when I find that my mind is listening in that state of receptivity, I have the partner in my mind ask the heart, what do you truly want from me right now? And then I just listen. I get the mind to just listen. And the amazing thing is usually my first instinct that comes to me, it's a totally different feeling than a thought of the mind. It's like this peaceful feeling of just, oh, that's what I need. I
Like
hear
what?
it. And
Give me an
then,
example.
okay, example. So yesterday morning, I woke up, I was still in bed, and I was feeling a little off center. I just felt like I might be coming down with a cold or something, which is rare. And so I did this practice. I put my hand on my heart, I closed my eyes, I took a few breaths, and I said, heart, what's going on here? What do I need? And my first instinct was get more sleep. So instead of rushing out of bed, which is what my mind wanted to do, and get to my to-do list, I honored the heart. The mind went, okay. And there was resistance. I'm not going to say this was easy. My saboteur was like, you don't have time to sleep in today. But my heart knew I needed to. So I did. I took an extra hour, and I just thought, I'm going to honor this wisdom of my heart. And I got up and I went through the day, and I felt way better. I felt like I got more done, less stress. It was amazing. So that's just an example of how this works. And so that when the mind starts learning how to listen and take action from the heart, as opposed to doing it all itself, these two partners come into balance. And we find that kindness is just the result, self-kindness, which overflows into kindness to others, genuine kindness to others. So
I love that. This is really a beautiful practice. And you are certainly a person who is very auditory, so you hear. But some people may just feel, they get more a sense of what they want rather than hearing it. Because I know that people have been trying sometimes to hear their inner voice, and they are hearing nothing. But when you ask them, so what does it feel? What feels right? When you make, some suggestions to your heart or your subconscious on what would the day look like if I choose this or this or this, then there is also like this where you feel drawn to, what resonates, what feels right. And so I guess you're also talking about being aware in mindfulness to your sensations and,
yeah,
those feelings of right or tuning in or being in resonance. And now you said before that, one of our problems in life is the shoulds, the external shoulds that tell us we need to do this, we need to look like this, we need to purchase this. And it sounded to me that this is exactly what you experienced at this, Canadian Idol, where you felt like
yeah,
you should always do more and you should always stand out. Now, you don't have to be in Canadian Idol to feel exactly like this. You just have to be in social media and you already wonder, so what do I need to do to get more likes, to look more cool, to be more, admired? And so what do you suggest mindfulness can do to get you out of this rat race of trying to be someone for somebody you don't even know?
yeah. Well, I think mindfulness gives us the opportunity to move out of the state of self-improvement, which is what a lot of us are on the trajectory of. And what I mean by self-improvement is this idea that I always can be better. I need to do more. I need to be more. I need to get more. It's a never-ending treadmill of just like constantly, you're never satisfied. You're never fulfilled. Where the difference between self-improvement and then this idea of self-acceptance, it's like there's a huge difference. When we finally drop into the present moment and we realize that in this present moment, all is well, and accepting this moment for what it is, and knowing that, of course, we've got a future ahead and we're going to move towards it, but already realizing that I'm enough. I already have everything that I need in this moment. And to think that I need something outside of this moment is actually kind of insanity, as Byron Katie used to talk about. It's like in this moment right now, all is well. I think it's what mindfulness does is it brings us it offers us the opportunity to be in the present moment, to really show up here. All of the stress and anxiety that we're feeling is actually not of the present moment. It's something. It's a story that we're telling ourselves about the future or the past, the future story of, I need to get more. I need the approval of people. I need them to like me. And, I agree, the social media culture of telling us, I need more friends, I need more followers. If I was to be totally honest with just releasing this book, I got into that. I found myself in this state of needing to get more followers, to like my book, to read it, and it became this idea of, I need to do more, self-improvement. And the moment that I stopped that and I went, self-acceptance here, hello, and I got present, there was like a deepening. Everything got easier. It was like there was a flow. It was Friedemann calls and says, will you be on the show? There's just this natural flow that takes over as opposed to forcing. So I think mindfulness offers us this opportunity to be present. You can't have fear in the present moment. Fear and anxiety and stress are of the mental concept of future or past story.
Unless, of course, you're dealing with a bear in front of your house, then I guess it's appropriate. But I agree. In our day and age, we don't necessarily fight saber-toothed tigers anymore. But, this is, again, what I believe a lot of people love to hear, this concept of I am enough. I just had a client sending me a testimonial about her work, and she was suicidal at the beginning. And once she got this concept of I am enough, that's her new foundation. That's how she lives her life, of always striving for something else, always identifying herself with others, and all of a sudden realizing I'm enough. I mean, her life is completely changed and she feels transformed. And just that realization made a huge difference. But what I find so interesting is what you're saying about being present. It really reminds me of us as children. I remember as a child, I was completely happy-go-lucky. I was completely connected in the moment. I saw magic everywhere, and I felt enough. I felt free. But then comes school, and then comes expectations, and then comes bad grades, and so on. And so all of a sudden, you do get the message, well, you're not enough. And don't even think that you're enough, because you have to do more, and you have to be more, and you have to accomplish more. And so is mindfulness as an everyday practice bringing you back to your roots, bringing you back to almost deprogram yourself from that, what you were told, which is be more than you are?
Yes, absolutely. I think what I'm finding more and more as I deepen in my mindfulness practice is this is ultimately a shedding of the ego. It's like a letting go of this never-ending hungry ghost that's telling me I need to be more successful and make more money and do more, be more. And we're in a culture that really, really, they kind of champion that. They encourage us to success. The cultural definition of success is somebody that's made a lot of money, that has a lot of likes and friends and social circle, and they're famous. And, these are things that are embedded into us unconsciously. We adopt them without even knowing it. And mindfulness is the return back to, okay, that's the outside world, but let me go inward here and ask myself, what is it that I'm truly being called to here? I'm already enough. It's this realization that when you become true to who you truly are, as opposed to trying to fulfill the agenda of somebody else, there's a peacefulness that comes over us, and we find ourselves way more on a path of life purpose and living from a place of giving as opposed to just needing. And it's a shedding of the ego. It really is. I want to say this has been a big thing this year. I remember Wayne, who was one of my teachers, Wayne Dyer, he used to talk about ego as edging God out. And the word God has a lot of different meaning to it. Some people get a little bit cringy when they hear the word God. But what I've come to know is the word God here is that state of awe. It's that you can even hear it in the sound of God. It's being in that creative state of awe. And I do believe that at our essential core, underneath all of these layers of separation, there's a oneness, there's a connection. There's a place we originated from and we still are and we're going back to, that is of awe, it's of oneness. And so it's learning how to, and remembering that that's who we are. And so when I say shedding the layers of ego, ego is edging us away from our essential nature, our true nature of who we are. And so this is a practice of like literally letting go of all of those false beliefs and asking ourselves, what is it that I'm intuitively being called to? You know, and that's really essentially what's going on under the surface of mindfulness for me.
Well,
Yeah.
I always have an issue with the ego in regards to making a part of us wrong versus saying, well, what about, isn't the whole idea of meditation and yoga oneness? So how can you edge out the ego and say it's wrong when the goal is to be one? So I think we have to find some kindness for the ego too, no?
Yes, yes. I don't think the ego is necessarily a bad thing. Yeah, I agree. I don't think the ego is necessarily a bad thing. I think the ego gives us the opportunity to know the difference between our true nature and what is not of that. And so there's actually a gift in the ego. The
That's what I
invitation.
believe, is the same thing with the gift of illness, the gift of
Yeah.
our emotions. I mean, we just are so quickly putting good or bad labels on something versus seeing, well, how can this actually help me and support me? So I'm
Yes.
glad that you mentioned this, the gift of the ego to also check in with yourself and ask, so who am I? Which is a part of your book, which I really loved as well, this whole chapter on around I am, how do I get to knowing myself? Because, obviously you're saying, well, you just are enough. Well, how can you know that you're enough if you really don't know who you are? So can you just give people one little tidbit of what we can do to get more awareness of who we are, what the I am is?
Sure. Well, I am are two of the most powerful words and thoughts we are thinking and saying all day long, because there's no denying it. I am, you are. Anything that you look at is, it just simply is, this conversation, this cup that I have beside me, it just is, I am. How we fill in the blank at the end of that statement as we go through the day completely has an effect on how we experience life. So if I'm going around thinking things like, I'm not good enough, well, that becomes your experience and your truth, because when we realize we're inner dreaming and we're creating our reality, that's what ends up happening. So to become conscious of how am I filling in the blank at the end of an I am statement is one of the best practices in mindfulness. And it's a living mindfulness practice. Am I looking at that person and thinking, I am so annoyed with them right now, or I am seeing them as my best teacher? How do I choose to look at something? And so becoming aware, a great exercise that I do often is I just make a list of money is, life is, my house is, my relationship is, and without overthinking it, I just fill in the blank. And I look back and I read it and I go, oh, money is hard to come by. Hang on, I don't want to be thinking that anymore. And I shift it and I go, okay, money is flowing to me freely. And at first my mind goes, yeah, right. So there's a really important distinction. It's a repetition of starting to feel into what it is that you want to be true. It's like feeling that desire already fulfilled and shifting it. So it's a really neat practice to just start becoming aware of, how am I filling in the blank at the end of each neutrality? I am, or this is, this person is, or this my life is. How am I choosing to look at that? Because we get to decide ultimately how we're going to view something. And that's what's so exciting about the practice to me, is that we're literally co-creating how we want it to be.
But ultimately, we don't really know an answer to the I am, who we are, because we are so much that we don't know, and so much there is still to discover, that at least I personally don't really have one definition of myself, because that would certainly diminish all that else can be there for me. But the practice of just seeing it as a momentary snapshot. I am this today, I'm this in the moment, and I accept this and I have kindness for this. Certainly a wonderful practice, which again, in your whole book, it's all about these kind of practices that bring us back into our center, into our core, the feet in the ground, the heart in the moment, the head in the stars, with all the infinite possibilities available. So thank you very much for writing it. Thank you so much for talking about it. Now, how can people find the book? How can people connect to you?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you for having me on this show. First of all, I'm so grateful to connect with you, and I love the work you're doing in the world. It's you just radiate this positivity. So I wanted to just say that.
Thank you.
In terms of staying in touch, my two ways. If you're looking for my book, Making Sense of Mindfulness, you can find that easily on Amazon. That's probably the best place to order it and find it. And my website to stay in touch with me is Keith Macpherson, Macpherson, keithmacpherson.ca. And there's a lot of tools and resources there that you can check out. There's a free mindfulness training on there, and I send out a daily intention every morning, a positive quote, and it's just a great way to let me be a resource for you if this is resonating. I'd love to be there for anyone that's tuning in that needs some support here.
keithmacpherson.ca. So thank you so much, Keith. This was a wonderful hour, mindfully spent. And I know that you touched many people's hearts and lives with today and your work in general. And similar to what you experienced there in your gym, where everyone was chanting together your song, I think a lot of people are mindful together now with us during this hour. So I really appreciate it. Well, this was another episode of Empowerment Radio. Until next time, stay kind to yourself and be mindful throughout the day. Goodbye.